Hey folks, this is Keith from the band Condemned. I'm just here thinking about, well, it's time to give you guys a little bit of an update and, wish everyone a good, happy 2021. Say goodbye to that crappy last year and, tell people a little bit about the band's origin. That was some of the questions that I got. First of all, we're recording right now for our new album called Mind Over Machine. And a little bit about rundown on the concept there is just the battle that I seem to have with technology, and it seems to be more in charge instead of me being the guy in charge of it all. But and then our new album is got the original guitar player that we started with back in our founding years, all the way from Australia, Les Rumincic on guitar from Vicious Circle history, and him and me have known each other for 35 years now, recorded our first record foundationally, and really communicate on a music level, so we're excited to be working together again. And we're also reunited with Slade Anderson, who was also part of the U.S. foundation of Condemned and part of the history there, Condemned Attitude era. And so let me just give you a quick update on the band's origin, and that's something that people want to know. How did you become an Australian-American hard, heavy punk metal band? And so the short version is I was growing up in San Francisco in the Mission District, and growing up as a early metal enthusiast as the thrash metal scene was evolving in San Francisco. I was also getting into punk rock and the immediate gratification I got from playing it. So at 17, I joined the band Condemned to Death at the Vats. We recorded some music together, a couple albums, recorded and toured, and eventually broke up in '84, where that left me trying to team up with Scotty, the singer at the time, who eventually went on to Verbal Abuse. But before he did, we were trying to get Scotty to get Joey to play with us in a new configuration of what we were doing. So one of the things that also happened is that Verbal Abuse was just growing in popularity and revitalization. There's no way to compete with that, so they basically got Scotty. And I left me hanging looking for another band. So at the time, living in the Mission District, we all used to hang out at Las Portales and drinking lots of margaritas and hanging out with Scotty. He introduced me to Peter McGrath from the band Death Sentence. That was kind of the turning point. Me and Peter hit it off, and they needed a bass player at the time, and I decided to move over to Australia, 1985. Once I was in Australia, playing with Peter, we recorded some stuff, mainly demo tapes. Then I ended up moving on to Vicious Circle and living in some squats with the drummer and getting Les and the drummer at the time, Dave Ross, who was in Vicious Circle and Civil Dissident, to help me record the first Condemned record to be released on Reactor Records there by Phil McDougall. And at the end of that year, or sometime that year, I believe in the summertime in the U.S., Vicious Circle decided that I'd just manage them, and they'd go back to the original lineup and do a little tour of the States. And once that was over, after touring with like GBH and Agnostic Front and a bunch of great bands all the way up to Dallas, Vicious Circle had a great tour. They went back, and I was looking for a new lineup, and I met Slade Anderson, who was more part of the thrash metal scene at the time. Was in a band called Mercenary at that point, and me and him started auditioning people, and eventually teamed up with Andy Anderson, an old friend from Attitude Adjustment, with Rick Strahl and Chris Capero, and formed Condemned Attitude, later to become Attitude. We recorded some music together. Replaced Slade with the drummer from Septic Death, and I eventually started Something Scaly in 1987 and moved on, and they continued without me, Attitude, and did some tours of Europe, and I started Something Scaly so I could start singing and playing bass and pursue writing more of my own style, more like prog punk. So basically from there, we went on tour in Australia, did a Something Scaly tour there in 1992 and recorded a record that's now available for streaming and eventually hopefully on some physical copies on Bandcamp. And you can find it there along with our other 3 releases. And the band took a hiatus until 2009. Found myself in Hawaii of all places, and found that my old guitar player Rick Stahl from Attitude Adjustment and Condemned Attitude was living there, and we put together a demo, and over the internet reconnected with Slade Anderson once again and a few of his other bandmates, and decided to do a collaboration. And the album Condemned to Death, C2D, is the guys were really enthusiastic about the Condemned to Death origins and wanted to pay tribute to that, so we called it Condemned to Death and did some cover songs of that album, the early days albums, songs I should say from the early Condemned to Death albums, mainly the 7-inch. And the lineup took a little break till reconfigured, I should say, and we recorded Steampunks in 2014, and now we're recording a whole new record, Mind Over Machine, reunited again, as I mentioned earlier, with Les Verminsick and Slade Anderson back on drums as a power trio, and really looking forward to what's going to be happening this year. But that's just a little background for all you folks wondering what's the complex origin, if at all, what Condemned came from and how they're working it out. And if it wasn't for technology, I don't know if me and Les could ever do this again as the way we are now. Since we've been in quarantine, me and him have been doing it all over the internet, as well as with Slade. And in reality, that's kind of how a lot of people record. We do hope to do a bunch of live performances at some point and get that going once this quarantine is lifted and we can get back on the circuit over there in Europe and hopefully do some festivals. So there's your long, storied rundown, and we'll get back to you maybe in a week here and give you a little bit more background on possibly Condemned to Death or Vicious Circle or any other future or past events we might have been involved in. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.